Greetings, everyone. I'm Derek Newton. I'm an education writer and reporter from New York City, and I want to start by thanking everybody for being here, wherever you are, joining us in the room. Thank you for your time and attention today, and wherever this message finds you around the world, greetings, and thank you also for your time and attention for this important conversation, which I'm sure getting to know the panelists will be not only outstanding, but clearly the best of the entire conference. So set the standard early on. The topic today, or the title of the conversation, is No Expiration Date, Making Learning Lifelong. And also just another housekeeping note, everybody's bio is so long, if I went through it, we would have no time to discuss anything. So please find their entire bios online. They're very impressive. I will just introduce the panel with a word or two about who they are and where they come from. So you get to know them, but there's certainly a lot more than what I'm going to get to. Joining us is Shalini Dwivedi, and she is the Global Director of Instruction at Generation, and Matthew Nebra. He is co-founder and Chief Innovation Officer at Open Classrooms. Joining us remotely is Dr. Fernando Leon Garcia. He is President of the International Association of University Presidents and President at CITAS University in Mexico. I hope I pronounced that correctly. You can correct me if I'm wrong. And also joining us is Denise Ameo. She is President and CEO of the Colleges and Institutions of Canada. So I think we're very well represented with a great panel, and I'm very excited. No one wants to hear from me, so we'll jump right in. First question, like all good topics, let's start by talking about what we're talking about. The title of the panel is No Expiration Date, but I'm curious to get your feedback, if you would provide it, on the two types of learning that are mostly associated with lifelong learning and workforce development. What we used to call hard skills, the things you need to do your job. Usually those are technical, people think about that. Programming, operating office equipment, machinery. And what we used to call soft skills, creativity, creative thinking, persistence, communication. Most of the time now, people are thinking of them as durable skills. The communication and lifelong skills, I think Dr. Yu had said learning how to learn was a good example of that. And then what we're also calling perishable skills, the business skills that are important, but you need to continually refresh throughout your lifetime. So I'd just like to start maybe with you, Shalini. Do you think that's a good understanding of the two buckets of learning we're talking about here? Or would you set the framework differently?
So one is I would definitely move away from hard and soft skills usage because there's also gender bias there. And actually would like to adopt verbiage that is understood by all stakeholders. So keeping it super simple because sometimes durable and perishable can be also ambiguous. So maybe just saying, hey, here are the technical skills and there can be foundation within it, but of course you can keep upskilling. But then there can also be behavioral skills and mindsets that, in your words, would probably be the more durable ones because they take much longer to build and are usually the foundation of what makes us good human beings and workers in general.
Well said, so simpler then. Love it. Matthew, what do you think?
The more I hear about hard and soft skills, the less comfortable I am with these words. But it is what people use. So first of all, we have to acknowledge that because we can try to change the words we use, but it's probably not going to be extremely helpful if everyone is using hard and soft skills. So let's go with that. But we need to understand what's behind that and what should we think when we think about them. And I like to think of soft skills as a kind of the meta skills, the skills that build other skills that help you acquire new skills, like learning how to learn, communication, problem solving. Everything here is to help you create stuff that you would then need hard skills to solve for. So that's I think that they are both important and clearly, and you may want to think a bit about T-shaped skills. The letter T, where I would say somehow the soft skills are the horizontal bar of the T, and the vertical bar where you get expert at something at one point in time is the vertical bar. So that's how you combine them. Clearly, the foundations are the soft skills, and then the hard skills you can choose to focus on them at one point in time. And if later in your life you want to go to another job or something else, then you go to another bar of the T, another hard skills.
I think that's very well said. Denise, What did our first two answers trigger in you? I saw you taking notes.
Yes, I was, because when Shalini mentioned that it was biased, and I had never realized it, that there was this gender bias. This is quite interesting, and I love what you said, Mathieu, with respect to the meta skills. In our country, in fact, we've stopped talking about hard and soft skills. I'm from Canada, and we talked about skills for success because those are the skills that will make you successful no matter what you do, no matter what kind of professions or trade you are involved in. And of course, those include creativity, working with others, critical thinking, and learning to learn.
Very well said. Fernando, anything to add that stood out to you from our first answers on how we are defining these sorts of sets of skills, whether we should at all, or what would you call them?
No, I think that the definition is not as clear cut, and I think that um, on the one hand, what you have are foundational skills that are really valid, useful for the long run, and that are applicable to many circumstances and that cut across many different settings. And then on the other hand, you have more specialized skills that, if you wanted to apply, perishable or time sensitive, then they are, that is the case. The more technical skills tend to fade over time, in particular, as we're finding that things change so rapidly. So I think that you need both. Some are longer term and that they can impact even the specialized, how you approach specialized skills. And then the others are some that are time sensitive, and that as the economy and society changes, you need to be upskilling, reskilling, etc.
All the skillings. That's very well said. Thank you. So I think we've agreed for all time now that hard and soft skills should not be what we use. So moving on. Thank you to all of you. Uh, is it possible, however we categorize them or describe them, the top of the T or foundational skills, is it possible, do you think, for an education system, especially one that is under resourced or maybe struggling in some way, to deliver both sets of those skills at the same time? Do you think it is even possible to do that? I mean, and I'm not looking for a yes or no answer, but yes or no is fine, because we're going to go. There's a secondary question which you all know is coming after that. So we'll just go the other way. Denise?
In fact, I would disagree with the premise that maybe we don't do it in schools. And there's a lot of underfunding for sure. In my own country, education is of provincial and territorial jurisdiction, and the public funding in public institutions varies from 88% to as low as 25%. Those are public schools, public colleges. And the good news, though, is that the graduates, 91% find a job. But the most important that is linked to your question is that 93% of employers are satisfied with our graduates. And the reason for that is because they are involved in the development of the curriculum. So for all our programs, we have 10,000 of them, there is what we call a program advisory committee that is made up of people from the industry. So they influence what should be taught. So I believe that this is part of the solution because, of course, it includes all the skills that are necessary.
That's very well said. And I have to take a moment and apologize for some bad housekeeping moderating. And just remind everyone, if you're in the room, there's a QR code you can use to ask questions. You can ask questions here through the app. And if you're seeing us or visiting us online, I understand there's a chat box or a question box or a portal that you can submit questions. We do want to get to audience questions. So please, if you have them, thoughts, comments, criticisms, share. Maybe save the criticisms for after. But Shalini, is it possible for a school system to deliver both types of skills in a general sense, or is that sort of a too ambitious a lift?
I think we first need to understand what needs to happen to be able to deliver that. We need good content that is multidisciplinary, it's based on problem solving, can integrate the behavioral skills and mindsets within the technical skills. So, is that good content there? Currently, we have so much focus on standardized tests that often that's not the case. Second, what needs to happen is instructors and teachers who are more facilitators in the process. So, are we then actually developing our teachers to be so? Now, as you said in your question, if it's an under resourced school or any education training, what happens more often than not is we don't have access to good quality content. Our instructors and teachers are unfortunately not receiving the professional development they need and deserve. But if those two are solved for, then there's nothing that stops us from actually being able to implement all of this. Because this doesn't need like some a high leverage or high internet speed or like some fancy hardware. It's just basic introduction at a human level if we get the foundations right. So I definitely think it can happen.
I love it. Matthew, what do you think?
I still feel uncomfortable with the opposition of hard and soft skills. I think there's just skills.
Yeah.
So you categorize them, and maybe putting them in two different boxes is too simplistic.
Okay.
Just first of all, what I think.
Mm-hmm.
But clearly, you need several types of skills. You need the know-how, the behaviors, pure knowledge sometimes, of course. And you need to have the right balance of them. It depends on what you're teaching, what's your goal, because education can have different goals. For us at Open Classrooms is directly to give people a job. So to do that, you wouldn't manage to do that probably with just soft skills, the behavioral skills. You need them, but you clearly need also the specialization so they directly employable after the training, if that's what you want. So it's really a question of balance, and for any training we build online, there should be between 20 and 30 skills. Some of them are soft skills, what we call soft skills, some of them are hard skills. And we build them actually, like was said before, with the industry by talking to them to try to understand what they need. It turns out that for any specific job, people have different needs. So they talk about the same job, but they expect different skills. So we try to summarize that and to put it into the program what we think is the average thing people need. And that's how we build it. In the methodology, really, the soft skills, generally speaking, are taught by the way people learn, the way we ask them to learn online. It's a way for them to learn how to learn, and we think that's one of the meta skills that will help in the future for them to acquire the new skills when they need them in the workplace.
Well said. Thank you very much. Doctor Fernando, I know you're on
One
video, but
comment.
go ahead.
Yes, one comment. You know, the session listed in the background, um, the World Economic Forum top 15 skills, and it's interesting that if you look at the 15, 3 are more of the hard skills, and 12 are more of the soft skills. And so I'll use that to preface my remarks. And I think that relative to the pandemic, before the pandemic, there was a call already for more relevant skills to be incorporated into the curriculum. And the pandemic has intensified this need. And on the one hand, you have students who are worried about making sure that what they take at a university lands them a job. On the other hand, you have the economy that's shifting. And so something as simple as being able to work from a remote setting to being able to work with and lead teams, the future of work and the work of the future is in transition. It's a constant movement. It's a moving target. So I think the conversation on the topic is not simple, nor is it unidimensional, unidirectional.
I loved what you were saying, but I think we lost some of it. So we'll circle back to you. Oh, are you still there? Did you catch up with us?
Yes,
Go ahead.
I'm here.
Yeah,
Can you still hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you perfectly. We just lost you for a few seconds. So if you don't mind, begin again.
Okay. So I was saying that if a college or university is supposed to develop the whole person, well-rounded individuals, that can add value to the workplace, plus be a substantive contributor to the immediate community of society that they belong to. You always need both. We need to work on both, whether you refer to them as hard, technical, or soft skills. What we will find is that there will be an increasing presence of partnerships where universities and organizations parlay on the best that the other can provide and create synergies to better serve students. So I think it is not a case of either or. We need to promote both. And the longer term, as we said before, are the foundational skills.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you for that. Thank you again to all of you. This is sort of an open question, just something that has been on my mind, frankly, for years, as we talk about how to develop people for the workforce, giving them the skills, however we define them, to get the job, but also do well in it and hopefully become lifelong learners. That it seems to me that the primary beneficiary of that effort is the businesses, the workforce, the people who are hiring the people. So I guess it's a two-part question. Do you think businesses are engaged enough in that process financially and contributing their input on what they need? And if not, why not? And maybe I guess I lied. It's a three-part question. What can we do to get them more engaged? So just if you would give some of your thoughts about the engagement of the beneficiaries, the hiring entities in this process of training their workers. We'll start with you, if you don't mind, Denise.
In fact, I mentioned the role of business earlier.
You did, yeah.
And for us, it's very important because when you involve business, they can influence the curriculum, as I mentioned, but they also provide very valuable informations on labor market needs. They can also be an asset when it's time to have internships for students. They can talk about the equipment that is used and is it the proper equipment or should the college or the institute upgrade their equipment. So I think it's a synergistic relationship and it's very, very important because when you ask students, why do they study? They all answer because I want a job.
Yes.
And so I think we should keep that in mind because at the end of the day, this is what they want. And more you will ensure that the students realize that what they do is useful and will have a meaning in the workplace, then they will be engaged.
I think that's great, and you're going to hate me, but I'm going to push you a little harder.
Sure.
Is the business community, the private
Yeah.
sector that is getting these trained workers that, as you mentioned, are, I know the subsidy levels vary depending on the type of
Yeah.
institution and geography and all this
Yeah.
stuff, but that are publicly subsidized.
Yeah.
Are they engaged enough in that process to get to I guess earn the rewards of a trained workforce?
So what I would say, there are other countries where the businesses provide more money. In my country, tax is very high. And so it means that there's an expectations that the government, your tax will pay for this. That said, when you have an institutions that only receive 25% of their public funding, and they are public institutions, it means that institutions are very entrepreneur. And when they are entrepreneur, it's because they involve the business sector also in either giving equipment, or providing internships or scholarships for students. Could they do more? Yes, of course. There's always a need for more.
Very good, thank you, Mathieu. I'm very interested to hear your perspective on this because my sense is you are sort of closer to the interface between training and directly into the workforce. So, what's your sense? Is the I don't know how else to describe them. The private sector, are they engaged enough in this process?
So I believe that if we ask the question today, that perhaps we don't think that's the case. The answer is probably in your question. And the reason is, well, it hasn't really been designed that way. It has been designed in isolation. So I'm going to repeat perhaps things people know, but it's how it has been built. And in fact, because there is no real feedback loop, the content, the training isn't updated as well and as often as it should. And I've seen that throughout even my um, early years, that sometimes the training that we had were completely outdated in terms of hard skills, like completely outdated. It was almost worthless. And it's because just they sometimes don't update the curriculum fast enough. So we are entering a new world where the skills change pretty fast. So the curriculum needs to change pretty fast. And we don't want to think about the change as discrete, but more continuous. That's what we do at Open Classrooms. It's like it's rolled out all the time. It's not. We try to avoid the big chunk of changes because that's the new world we live in. It must be a continuous process, um, and really it should be part of the design as well to work obviously with employers because I believe that they are the end goal for many or most of the students. So that's why we engage the businesses, the recruiters early on when we design a training path online. But also they are part of the jury when we deliver the diploma. So at the end they are the ultimate gate saying these people have the skills, so let's give them the degree, or they don't have the skills, they need to rework that. So that's how we do that, and that's how we get the feedback loop. But I need to add something to that. I believe one very powerful element that is sometimes forgotten in education um, is apprenticeships. It's really the bridging the gap, and I know it has had some bad press for whatever reason in the past because it's for somehow blue collar jobs and it's not well paid or whatever. It's not the case. First of all, blue collar jobs are fine and we need more of them. And second, it works really well for white collar jobs. And on Open Classrooms, we have lots and lots, thousands of online apprentices, and they learn, for instance, data science, and they work as a data scientist during the week. And the combination of the two is super powerful because that's how you blend the two.
I I could not agree more. Thank you for mentioning apprenticeships. They're often an overlooked part of this conversation. Fernando, what is your thoughts on the level or depth of engagement by the private sector in this process?
Yes, no. Well, several things. First of all, we need to remember again one point I made earlier, and that's that higher education institutions exist not only to provide training and skills for jobs, but developing citizenry. So I think that you have multiple players and collaboration and synergies that involve government, higher education institutions, and business and industry. That said, I think that there's room for more communication, coordination, and cooperation so that the type of timeliness, relevance, and applicability of what the students are receiving are more in tune. And we move in universities from just in case curriculum, they take all these things which may be useful in the future to more just in time. But I think that thinking of my own context, there are numerous universities, including my own, where there's an advisory council, there's program review, systematic, there's practica, there are internships, there's scholarships, there are projects, there's funding for labs, there's donations. So I think that to the extent that you get this interactive, synergistic relationship, the probability is much higher that what and how you prepare will be more relevant and more in tune with what industry needs.
Great, thank you, Shalini.
So, I think a couple of things to start off with. We've been talking a lot about first time job seekers, but would also like to include almost like the 470 million underemployed folks into this conversation because it is about lifelong learning. And having said that, yes, there has been a history of employers being okay with the status quo of high attrition rates. Okay with paying money to headhunters to actually get people into the organization from outside rather than upskilling their own staff. So, if you look at the whole spectrum of the learning skill, are the employers where they need to be? No, but have they come a little bit ahead? Yes, and there's still a long way to go. Having said that, I think a couple of the ways we can actually engage with them is first is incentive alignment. I think, like Matthew said, because right now the education system and the workforce is so disjointed, there's no alignment of the incentives. So, like Denise said, actually including them in the curriculum development. For example, in our programs, what we also do is actually include them in the assessments. What do you want the final assessment to be? So it simulates the workplace. Come be a part of our assessments. Don't go into the sort of the degree signaling trap. Actually change the nature of the interviews. So we're giving the underrepresented communities who are not good at traditional interviewing skills a chance, like a fair playground, getting the feedback again, like Matthew mentioned, but also and apprenticeships, of course, but also saying, hey, like, what is it in your workplace that you need? What are the benchmarks that you want our learners to showcase? And if they meet that, are you actually then willing to put your skin in the game and put money in and give it back to the training partner so they can then fund it back for more learners?
That's what I was trying to say. Thank you. And you're a little bit of a future teller on because you brought up assessment, and we have a question from the audience. Again, thank you for submitting. We have a few. If you're in the room again, there's a QR code, and you could submit questions through the app. If you're finding us online now, you can submit your questions through the chat portal there. But this is a question from the audience. There is an issue of assessment. We have frameworks to measure and evaluate hard skills, but what about soft skills? How can learners demonstrate soft skills as they continue to improve them? And we'll just go in reverse order, Shalini. Since you brought it up, that's all you.
That's on me. Um, so we've actually been doing this for 5 to 6 years. We have behavioral skills and mindsets that we integrate with the technical skills. So at the end of the day, it's one activity that you do made up of different skills. But we actually have a rubric for each of the skills where learners are able to reflect and say, okay, you know what, for persistence, these are the actions that I was able to observe in myself. So here on the rubric I am. And then we do weekly set of reflections, we do peer reflection. So it's not just instructor driven. And they can actually see their journey on the rubric. So it's tough to say, oh, I take 2 out of the 4 marks. Like that's not how life works. That's not how soft skills, as to say, work. It is qualitative, it is based on self awareness, it is based on how your peers are sort of pushing you to think on your journey. But there are definite ways to and tools that can actually help you progress on that spectrum. So that's possible, and we've been doing it.
Sounds great. Machu, what do you think? How are we doing at assessing? Again, we're still using soft and hard, and we talked a lot
Yeah,
about that.
I won't comment on that. I already
Yeah.
did. I think there's a misconception that you cannot evaluate well the soft skills first, and it's unhelpful to say that and to spread the word that hard skills are clear and it's mathematical, while soft skills is more in the air. No, no, no. There are frameworks. You just Google. I just did it right now. Soft skills framework. There are many. We use one at Open Classrooms. I think it's ESCO. There are European frameworks, for instance, and like every time everyone is trying to make up their own framework, obviously, but there are some good frameworks. We looked at them, and there are levels for each skills, and they are well organized between them. I mean, it's clearly helpful. So if you're wondering how to assess soft skills, what are the soft skills or whatever, just Google soft skills framework. Look at, for instance, the European one. I think an Italian researcher has done some remarkable work on that, and you get a nice nifty table to help your thinking. And honestly, when you look at the description of the skills and the stage you are in that skills, like communication, you have, I believe, enough elements for you to create the assessment and to put each person in a box to say where they are and what they should do next. And that's very important. You have to tell them to get there, you need to be able to do that so they understand what is expected of them. So really, the solutions are out there. We just need to use them then.
Sounds good.
Let's do it.
Fernando, what do you think about the ability to assess and measure whatever we're going to call them, the less technical skills?
No, I think it would be along the same lines that was already responded. What you find at colleges and universities is an increasing use of number one, learning outcomes. that, of course, they're more qualitative if you're talking about the soft skills, but increasingly you find institutions using this. And then on the other hand, you also see a move or trend towards competency-based education. So I think that there are ways of assessing it, and that while most institutions still do not do it, it is the direction in which assessment is moving. In particular, program accreditation, program accreditation agencies, and institutional accreditation agencies are pushing institutions to move in that direction. So I think that there's an increase in doing this in colleges and universities. It is possible.
Well, thank you, Denise.
It's interesting because in Canada, in the college system, it's done everywhere. It's all competency based, it's all about learning outcomes, and those are acquired through either simulations, internships, and it's very interesting because even if the student does volunteer work, for example, they will be assessed also, and they will be able to mention it in a digital badge or something like that so that they'll be able to be recognized for what they know.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you to all of you. Again, we have another question, several now from the audience coming in. This one, next one. Curious to know the panel's perspectives on the future of higher education in light of this emerging focus on lifelong learning. How should higher ed adapt, especially in their business model? I think this is a really good panel for that question. So thank you to whomever submitted it. Shalini, what do you think?
It's a tough one because if you go out there and you talk to sort of the folks who've been in part of the training organization's business, I think there's almost a subtle understanding that universities are going to change massively over the next couple of years and are not going to look like what they look like right now. How to change their business revenue model? That's again, we were in a conversation yesterday where somebody was telling us that the majority of the revenue of the universities comes from infrastructure and accommodation. And if that's the majority of the revenue, it's going to be very tough, and especially for Ivy League colleges, or like that is what they get to focus on. It's going to be very tough for them to be able to change that. And so, if we want higher ed to look different, universities, while they take their slow path to changing their revenue model, because it can't be done overnight, have to set up absolutely different innovation hubs that can create more modular, agile, flexible learning pathways for the learners who currently aren't able to go into the formal education space.
Thank you very much. Fernando, I know you covered some of this, but as a university president and as a leader of university presidents, how should higher ed adapt in light of the conversation we're having today?
Music to my ears in terms of the question. We just had a triennial conference in the summer. And so I'll speak about what leaders pointed out, the direction in which higher education needs to move. First, as institutions and leaders, we need to exercise nimbility, quickness in response, much quicker than in the past. We need to exercise a bifocal leadership, short term, long term. We need to acknowledge and incorporate something that folks from India call academic bank of credit. Learners are going to graduate when they graduate from more than one institution, and ways of assessing this is going to have to be embedded into what we do. We need to be intercultural and international. We need to look at diversity and inclusion as a strength. We need to be able to put together short, accessible, laser focused programs that emphasize the skills, more personalized programs, more individualized learning. And as my uh, as my colleague who just intervened before me, we are going to move in the direction of greater flexibility in course formats, just-in-time qualifications, flexible delivery models, shorter knowledge and skill sets, badges, micro-credentials, credentials, embedding practical training, and again, emphasizing the move towards competency-based education. We have our work cut out, we're going to need the way we have done things in the past and be more responsive and more nimble and quick.
How much time you need? A week? 2? Take care of that. Go ahead and knock that out for us. Thank you again. Denise, what do you think?
So what is interesting is that the post-secondary college system in our country is only 50 years old or 52 years old. And when we were created, it was to serve the needs of the community. And so it's part of our DNA to do that. And when I looked at the future, I'm very happy with what is being done, but I think we need to go a step further. So for me, the prime example is that right now we have semester system. Like us, we have 3 semesters during the year. I believe you should be able to enter into the system any day of the year, not only 3 times a year, because if not, we may lose some people. Second thing, we need way more pathways. We were talking about apprenticeship earlier. So we need to make sure that there are pathways no matter what, and that you're not only in one place. Third thing, for me, it's very important that we have green skills everywhere in all the programs, because our planet is in danger, and it's important that we think about sustainability. And it was mentioned earlier, inclusion. The pandemic has shown that the ones that were the most affected during the pandemic were the more vulnerable people. And that's enough of that. Because we are facing a big labor shortage. And it means we need everybody to be able to play a role in society and work if they want to. So that's very, very important. So those are some of the aspects that I think are critical.
Fernando, did you get all that? Taking notes? Because what did we give you? 2 weeks? So you got to probably leave us early to get started.
I forgot one.
All right, give it to us.
I forgot one, and it's crucial. I'm dreaming of a place where a learner arrive in an institution, no matter who is the learner, and they will be first assessed for what they know. Mm-hmm. And when we know what they want to do, they will only have to complete what they don't have. They will not have to repeat what they already know. So it's called PLAR, Prior Learning Assessment Recognition. Mm-hmm. And the day we will do that, I think we will be the most successful education system in the world.
There are some institutions in the United States that do that. By some, I think I mean 2.
I
So
know.
not,
that's part of the issue.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. Mathieu, what do you think about the question?
I think lots of things have already been said, and I agree very much with them. So the whole list that I hear about what needs to happen, I haven't heard anything I disagree with first. Mm-hmm. So it's a long list. I think one useful way to think about it is, you may have understood that I represent not the incumbents, but more the new players. And the advantage when you're a new player is that you have an empty book to write. And so for us at Open Classrooms, we were skill-based from day one. You mentioned that you would like students to start at any day in the year. That's exactly what we do. You can start at any day, and the duration of your program is just the duration that you need. You don't need to wait 3 years to get a bachelor degree. We deliver you a bachelor degree, but just we do it once you have all the skills. So some people will get all the skills for a bachelor degree in 1 year, some in 18 months, some in 10 months. So this flexibility and adaptability to the students is possible, and we're doing it at scales with tens of thousands of students. So clearly, it is possible, it is happening, but you need to change most of the framework, and I believe it is very tough, not impossible, but very tough to start with an existing institution with existing practices and to make that happen. It is much harder than what we had to accomplish because we started with an empty book, right? You just mentioned the ability to to complete only the part of the degree that you need with prior assessment. And this is also the direction we headed to, where you can combine the micro credentials and they really lead to a degree. And we're working with accreditation bodies in France, the UK, and the US, in Africa to make them connect to each other, so you can instantaneously get a degree that is a degree valid in the UK, in the US, Africa, and France. And if you have a micro degree, you can combine them and just create your own path. And if it leads to a degree, then you get the bachelor and the master degree. So this is a future that is happening. It is possible. It is tough, but it is possible. And I believe everything you said is valid. This is where we need to go.
Thank you very much. Again, just I'm going to start on my left, which if you're watching on screen may be completely the opposite. But thinking about what maybe people don't understand or get wrong or maybe have the misconception about, thinking specifically for you about governments, policymakers, people who set the rules that we all play by, and thinking about lifelong learning, workforce development, what's something that government gets wrong? What would you tell them if they were listening? Here's something you don't understand that I want to clarify for you. What would you say about that?
I'm going to be respectful and not say you get it wrong. I'm going to say maybe consider. Uh, but I think, especially in the skilling space, right, a lot of the actors, and especially the government actors, are so focused on these are the number of people we trained, these are the number of people who graduated. But there is very little understanding from a data perspective of what really happened inside the classroom. What worked well, what didn't work well, what's our retention 1 year, 2 years down the line, what happened to their career trajectory. And I think that's the data we need to start collecting and then reflecting and then creating policies around that. So we're aligning incentives for all of the stakeholders present. Because otherwise, it's just a very short term focused goal of just getting people trained, but unfortunately not being able to place them anywhere.
Thank you very much. Fernando, to you, what is something that people misunderstand or get wrong? But to you specifically, I'd like to hear you answer, if you don't mind, about what in the U.S. we call the K-12 system, the primary or secondary system. What do people who run those organization institutions you think misunderstand or would be helpful to clarify for them?
I think several things, and not being specific to the US, but just in general, I think. First is a misunderstanding and in terms of what higher education is useful for. And so if the only focus is on jobs, we're missing the boat, because education is an instrument that develops citizenry and that has impacted the development of many countries. So I think that policymakers need to make sure that there's a more comprehensive view in terms of the value of higher education on the one hand. On the other hand, it's very important that there be more coordination and linkages, if you will, between K-12 and higher ed. A lot of times there are problems because there has not been the appropriate linkages between one level and the other. So policymakers need to be aware of this so that a closer collaboration will lead to much better results in the education of the citizenry.
Very good. Thank you again. So we heard from Shalini about what government and policy leaders may misunderstand, and we heard from Fernando about what the K-12 or the primary system maybe need to hear a little more clearly. Matthew, what does higher ed need to hear a little more clearly or maybe misunderstand in your opinion?
I would have preferred to answer the question you.
I know, that's why I gave you. I know, that's why I gave you the one I gave you. I mean, you can. There's no rules here. You can answer her question.
No. I want to answer.
Or do both.
But it is true that what we do is partly higher ed, partly lifelong learning, and we don't make any difference. The student can be 18 years old or 40 years old, and it's a trend that we're seeing. The concepts are a bit merging. So people who are reskilling when they are 40 years old, they entering a program like a program that a young person would learn to just skill first for a first job. So I have to say that our experience is more in the middle of the career. Although we have many young students, but it's not the majority. Um, and and it is hard for me to give you something first to say you K-12 misunderstand something, um, but my concern is more about what we tell people about the job that they could do. My experience with K-12 is that teachers were good, but many of them didn't have any other work experience than being a teacher. And so when you ask them, what will it be useful for, or what can I do with this, or what's the purpose of all of this, they always have general and vague answers. It is true that it is good to learn for the sake of learning. It is absolutely true that learning is not just about getting a job, and I want to emphasize that. We at Open Classrooms decided to focus on just that part because we think it's a hard problem on its own to solve. But I completely agree that education is about more than that. Although we shouldn't underestimate the importance of giving kids a vision of what they can do in the future. And that you have to do early on. If you want to solve or improve diversity and inclusion, you need to show a diversity of people doing a diversity of jobs, interview them in the classroom when people are young, so they can project themselves into that job, and then in 10 years, in 20 years, we may see a trend changing and people joining these jobs in high demand that cannot find enough students, enough people, and with a more diversity of people. But it is like everything in education, we often forget it's a long game. So you need to act now for the future generation.
Right.
And for K-12, I believe it's projecting the jobs, putting people from the private sector also just explaining what they do, and having a conversation about the life that they can have as an adult.
Very good, thank you. Denise, you may have the trickiest one of all of these. Thinking about people already in the workforce or potential future lifelong learners, what's something that you think that group of people maybe misunderstands or would help to clarify to them?
In fact, I'll talk about what's missing for them. It's often access to funding to pursue their studies, because especially when you graduate from higher ed, you often have debts. You start a family, so and to have the possibility to pursue your learning, to have as an incentive. For example, I know one institution in the world, I don't know two, unfortunately, only one. What they do, students that graduate, they have access to one course in their first 5 years at no cost. I think it's brilliant because this is a way to begin to incentivize those graduates to lifelong learning. The other people is those that are in the gig economy. I think they are forgotten when we think about lifelong learning. That said, there is research that has been done that shows that they are the one that in fact do the most lifelong learning, because they know that for them it's a matter of survival.
Right.
To constantly upskill, reskill, and however, there's no financial support for them. And for me, it's missing. And if I may,
You may.
Fernando talked about the importance of linking the K to 12 to the higher education. I want to talk about something that is being done in my country, but I'm sure in other countries in the world, is what we call dual credits. And we do that especially for those students that are vulnerable. And often it's more for the parents than it is for the student. And so the way it works is that there are faculty of both high school and university or college
Right.
that in fact teach in one course, and the student get a credits from both the high school as well as the post-secondary. And I think it's part of the future to do that. I know in Quebec they do that only if you're good at school. while in the rest of our country, it's for the vulnerable population. So I think that it shouldn't be for one group or the other. It should be accessible to all.
I agree, and very well said. We've only got about maybe 4 or 5 minutes left, and I want to save a little bit of time for just 45 seconds or a minute from each of you on final thoughts on this topic. Anything you want to share, but we have a question for Mathieu directly, and so if you wouldn't mind taking a minute to address this. I think this comes from the audience. Someone wanted to know more specifically about your pedagogy model around allowing every learner to complete their degree as soon as they're ready. Questions about adjusting to the individual learners and whether any part of that might be applicable to public education. I know that's like a 7-part
45
question.
seconds.
Yeah, 45 seconds.
Wow.
Go.
Okay, let's begin. Again, the problem is if you start with a framework in mind of your experience in education, it becomes almost impossible what we do. So you need to start with a blank page. What we do is that we don't have technically a classroom with a cohort of students who start at the same time, who go to a course and then another one, and then there is an assessment at the same time for everyone, right? They can start at any time. What happens is that no course is mandatory on open classrooms. It's project driven, meaning that they start with projects. First day you want to learn how to become a website developer, you get an assignment to build a website, and you don't know anything about building a website. So usually people are a bit crazy at that time because they're afraid they cannot do it.
Sure.
But we give them courses that may help them, and especially they get a private mentor online that will guide them every week, so it's a cadence. And that's really how it works. It's a cadence of every week you get to see your mentor synchronously. The rest of the time is asynchronously with the courses, but more specifically the projects that is competency-based that we have, and they have 10 projects to complete. So the thing is, once they have completed the 10 projects, the program stops. It just, because it is individualized, you just have to complete your project with the help of your mentor, validate with another mentor to prove that you got the skills, go to project 2, number 3, 4, 5, 10, you're done. You don't have to pay anymore, it's done. So this is how we do it. Perhaps public education can copy-paste it. Perhaps there is a different way of doing it for sure, but this is how we do it.
That sounds great. That music means that I have mismanaged the time. So any pressing final thoughts? We probably have a minute. Anything you think we messed up or needs an underline real quick? Anybody who doesn't get to comment now, 1,000 words by the end of the week, just get it to me and we'll share it with us. Go ahead.
I think there's one thing that we haven't talked about is discriminations with respect to learning and aging. Often there are policies that says, okay, it's only if you're up to 30 years old, or if you're 65, you don't have access to it. I disagree with that. I think lifelong learning should be lifelong learning, no matter who you are, no matter where you are at, no matter what's your age.
I don't think you'll find anyone in the room who would disagree with that. Certainly not me. And I do have to wrap up. We have to leave it there. Thank you again to our great panel. Thank you to the audience for tuning in and being here in the room. And enjoy the rest of the session and enjoy your time here if you're here. Thank you again.
Thank you.